Sio Nagad Kanji Stage Dagwadon, Ji Jalag Utan, Jundel Kwasti Dagi Lastane. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joshua Drywater, and I'm the program manager for Native Initiatives here at the Sonoran Center. As a combat veteran, this topic that we'll be discussing today is very near and dear to my heart. So I've been asked to kind of go over a few of the basic definitions and some of the statistics before I hand it off. Concussions and TBIs are often defined as a disruption in the normal function of the brain caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head or a penetrating head injury. There are over 2 million new cases every year in the US. It comes from numerous causes, including falls, assaults, struck by or against, traffic accidents, etc. Also, the severities of the injuries can vary from concussion to moderate to severe TBI. The sequelae or consequences of the injury vary between survivors and over time. According to the CDC, Native Americans have the highest recorded incidence of TBI. Although we don't know the true incident, we do have some statistics. Native Americans have the highest rates of hospitalization and death from TBI. 189.6 hospitalizations and 43.7 deaths per 1,000 people in Arizona in 2018. The top causes include falls, assault, and accident. This is also compounded by Native American survivors risking poorer outcomes due to disparities, health, poverty, violence, and systemic racism. So with that introduction, I'd like to hand it off to Austin to continue our presentation.
Thanks, Joshua. My name is Austin Duncan. I'm a disability anthropologist and severe TBI survivor with the Sonoran Center. Without further ado, I would like to introduce both of our two presenters who I've worked with for several years over several TBI and disability-related initiatives, Maria Martinez and Regina Cisneros, and I will be handling the slideshow, but I will not be presenting. So without further ado, Regina and Maria, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Austin. What a beautiful introduction. First of all, thank you for that. That was a beautiful introduction. My name is Regina Rodriguez Cisneros. I'm joining you today from Colorado. My organization is called Colorado JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I'm also a board member for Re-Inspired Minds with my colleague here, Maria Martinez. I am an Indigenous Latina female. I am wearing and intentionally today, I am wearing a Denver Nuggets championship shirt, black t-shirt. I have my hair pulled back. I'm wearing glasses and I have dark hair. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and ella. And I'll pass it over to Maria.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Maria Martinez. I'm from Pueblo, Colorado. I am a person with lived experience from a traumatic brain injury and a stroke. I am the director of Re-Inspired Minds, which is a nonprofit, and Pueblo Brain Injury LLC, which focuses on classes, support groups, and events and activities within the Pueblo County area. I am Indigenous. My parents were both from Indigenous lands from here, and my mother is from Indigenous land of Mexico as an Otomi Indian. So welcome. And I'll turn it back over to Regina.
Thank you, Maria. So quickly, I wanted to go over the agenda, and it's really important that we include the agenda, especially for those of you who are seeking some learning credits for this particular webinar. So what we hope to do, obviously went over welcome and introductions, go over some definitions that I think are important to our conversation today. And I never take for granted that we all have the same perception on definitions. So I go over definitions quickly so that you'll understand when I'm using certain words throughout our presentation, how my idea behind how I'm defining those words. Quickly going over social determinants of health and talking about how brain injury in the Native Indigenous communities and social determinants of health really impact our communities and set some different priorities and some different struggles that we're experiencing in our Native communities and Indigenous communities. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I also wanted to introduce some dialogue about discussing Western medicine versus tribal medicine, and really understanding that at many times they could run parallel, they could run against one another, and that we really need to understand that the belief system and the culture of Indigenous communities varies across tribes, and that it also may or may not conflict with Western medicine, which is the heterogeneous system over the United States. Also wanted to offer, and this is really where we want to highlight Maria's work in Colorado, specifically in rural Colorado, and her experience working with marginalized communities, and then talk about the success and barriers that she's been up against in ensuring that resources are being supported in rural communities. And then we have a short presentation that we're really excited. Cindy Kai, who will be joining us, talking about some resources, some national resources. So that's how we're planning to spend the next hour. So we'll move on to the next slide and get started. I'm not going to go over the definition of brain injury. It's here for you. And we had, Josh did a great job of talking about the definition of brain injury, but I wanted to talk about the definition of disability and the definition of disability in Indigenous culture. So the definition of disability is defined as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one's major life activities. A person who has a history or record of such impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having an impairment. Now, there's also a definition of disability, and this, like I said, it's really important that we remember that each tribe has its own culture, has its own language, has its own governance. So it's really important that we recognize that when we're talking about language, that we talk about the language that relates specifically to the community that we're working with and to the citizens of that community. But generally speaking, Native American conceptions of disability are unique in that they don't really exist. There is no language equivalent or translatable concept for the word disabled, crippled, or handicapped. The closest translation in the majority of Indigenous communities are being different. It means being different. But really, as you start to learn about and immerse yourself into Indigenous community, really the best way that I can describe disability in Indigenous communities is a disharmony of the spirit. That, and if you keep that planted in your mind as we talk for the next 45 minutes, that's how I'll be talking about the experience of Indigenous communities, is a disharmony of the spirit when we're referencing disability. So again, Josh talked about the incidence of brain injuries in Indigenous communities. And it's important to recognize that the CDC has acknowledged that Native communities have the highest rates of TBI-related deaths between the years of 2000 and 2017. Of those, motor vehicle accidents are at the heightened reporting. It's also really important to understand, and this is a behind the scenes piece of information about Indigenous communities. They also have the highest rate of American Indian, Alaskan Native children who are disproportionately affected by TBIs through violence or intentional mechanisms such as assault and violence. And that's really important to understanding some of the traumas, some of the difficulties, some of the hardships and experiences that some Indigenous communities are enduring and have endured at the hands of colonizers, at the hands of people within and outside of their community and the oppression there. So the next slide that I wanted to talk about, excuse me, I have a pop-up chat, are social determinants of health. And now pulling away from specifically talking about Native and Indigenous communities, what I wanted to highlight here is the concept and the commitment to social determinants of health by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, specifically under the Office of Healthy People 2030. Now, social determinants of health are defined as conditions in our environment where people are born, where people live, where people play, worship, and then, also considering that social determinants of health, not only is it your geographic environment, but it's also the range of your health, and it also determines how you are able to obtain quality of life outcomes. And the quality of life outcomes standing side by side with these social determinants of health, which are health risks, contributing health risks, and barriers to you accessing the quality of life. So social determinants of health are divided into 5 domains: access to education and quality of education, access to healthcare and quality of healthcare, the neighborhood, the environment that you live and reside and work in, your social community, and later on we'll hear Maria talk a little bit about social community and how she's really working hard to acknowledge the social and community priorities in rural and hard to serve communities. And then economic stability. All of these factors play into your quality of life health outcomes, and they are consistent for everyone. These apply to all of us. So Healthy People 2030 are working really hard to dismantle racist barriers that have been embedded into structural systems, and working really hard to prioritize filling the gaps in accessing resources related to these social determinants of health. So there's some specific challenges related to social determinants of health that Native people face on a daily basis. There's high rates of poverty and unemployment in many of our communities, high rates of violence against women and children. There's inadequate health care, inadequate access to health and mental health care, especially in rural communities. There's not adequate education being provided. There's inadequate and lower quality education being provided. There's high rates of alcohol and substance abuse. There's stress and mental health trauma that's related to racial abuse and social discrimination. I'll also add in there that there's a high impact of generational trauma and things that Indigenous and Native communities are working through to heal from. There's climate issues and inadequate access to natural resources, particularly access to water. There's transportation barriers, technology barriers, language access barriers, and then there's a high rate of providers distributed throughout our states that don't have a quality understanding of culture. And I'll add in that component that unfortunately, and it's just us needing to learn better, that we tend to group Indigenous communities into one group. And that's really a disservice. There's so many different tribes and different languages and different cultures that I said before, and I go ahead and repeat that multiple times because it's really imperative that we honor those differences, beautiful, unique differences in different cultures, in different tribes. So to start us off, what I thought I would do is share a video. Maria Martinez and I participated through NCAPS. I recorded interviews with 15 different participants from different race, ethnicities, lived experiences, people geographically spread out across our nation, people who represented the aging community, people who were of the younger community, people LGBTQ+. In other words, a super diverse set of 15 videos that are free, available on YouTube under the NCAPS playlist, NCAPS Person-Centered Planning and Cultural Influences playlist. And so Maria recorded one of those. And I think Maria's testimony to the experience with person-centered planning, cultural barriers, and rural experience is phenomenal. And also her experience as an individual with a brain injury and her experience caring for her mother. So if you could play that for us, Dustin, that'd be great. Austin, excuse me.
Hello. My name is Maria Martinez, and I'm from Pueblo, Colorado. I've had brain injuries in my youth and also as an adult. I am a caregiver for my mama, who's 100. She'll be 101 in August. She is blind, hearing impaired, and in the 1970s had a stroke, which weakened her left side and causes her, she has minimal short-term memory. Receiving care for mama as a caregiver requires advocacy, advocating for mama's dignity as an elder, her language, respecting how she wants to be cared for by a female provider. As an indigenous woman from Mexico, her culture is important for maintaining balance in our lives. I cannot separate our culture when planning for medical concerns, agency assistance, or community interaction, because we don't separate ourselves or who we are when we want to receive care or participate in community. Most providers do not have staff who can translate. I am the translator, which does not allow me to focus on how mama is being cared for. Multitasking is difficult for me. Available options for translation via phone is not an option for a hearing impaired person without accessibility for that phone. Welcoming culture into providers' offices is minimal, and the few that have anything for presentations like a poster, which is not current with time. Meeting the needs of our indigenous elders and other cultures is none to minimal. Seeking providers that practice themselves person-centered practices is important. When a provider speaks to mama in her language, sees her as a person, gathers information of who, where she is from, what her needs are, is more comforting to mama, and it's less anxiety she and I experience with providers. Our community needs providers who represent people of color. Bring professionals back into community who represent those in community and actively practice their own cultures. Allow people to receive care from providers who greet them with their language, understands how the elders use of medicinal practices that heal them, the importance of spiritual support, our values, our religion, the importance of practicing our culture as a whole person. Let us celebrate who we are with dignity, respect, and compassion, and honor our culture and other people's cultures. This is important of person-centered practices. Thank you.
That is one of my favorite videos because I think what it does is it really encompasses the importance of acknowledging an individual's culture, who they are, and thinking about, yes, they're there for medical care. Yes, they're in your office for some type of case care coordination, person-centered practices. But a person in front of you has some identities that we all have identities in ourselves that are so important to who we are, how we make decisions, who we want at the table, the language that we use, and the quality of life that we're seeking. And so I feel like it's really important to discuss that from the perspective of understanding Western healthcare versus tribal medicine. And I think that, as I was studying this back when I was in school studying the concept of Western healthcare, it really broke down into, 3 words. There's a diagnosis, there's a label, there's a prescription. More often than not, when you go into Western medicine, these are the steps to really, providing services for people: a diagnosis, a label, and a prescription. That is really doesn't quite align with tribal culture. And so I think that it's important to understand again that disharmony that is experienced by a person who is of the indigenous native communities, where really what's happening is an imbalance between your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit. And when I say spirits, I'm inclusive of recognizing the ancestral spirit. Wellness is directly connected to our whole body existence, our whole spiritual existence, our soulful experience. It relates specifically to our nature, our environment, our community, our ancestral spirits, all of the different elements that are encompassed under many of our different medicine wheels and the way that we navigate through life. And so I think that's really important to understand because as you can see from the different perspectives, although we're seeking a resource, seeking services and seeking a resource, we're entering into that conversation with two different perspectives. I also think when we say person-centered practices, and I'll just say this quickly, that it is also difficult for many people who come from community-based cultures to hear the word person-centered, hear the words person-centered. For many, even Latino communities, Asian communities, indigenous native communities here in the US and Canada, across our nation and Mexico, we're really family-centered. We really think about family, the family unit, the tribe, the community. So person-centered in and of itself can sound very confusing to the way that we think. So next slide, Austin, thank you. So I wanted to introduce the concept of the medicine wheel so that we can understand what I'm talking about in this holistic approach here. And I do also want to disclose that this is one medicine wheel. This is one medicine wheel, and there's multiple medicine wheels depending on which tribe you were to communicate with or work with. And so it's really important to understand how they lead their priorities in their communities. But there's many of the medicine wheels have a circular symbol broken into 4 quadrants. And it's primarily a tool that's used in our communities to pass knowledge and shared beliefs through the storytelling by our elders, our families, our community, teaching us how to honor and how to navigate life here and how to really make sure that we understand that there's a flow in us that relates to the balance of our health and the balance of our environment's health. Our Earth's health. There's a balance to connecting to our ancestral health and connecting to our well-being, so our mind, body, soul, and spirit. So if you look at this here medicine wheel, you can see that on the northern quadrant, there's mental health. On the eastern quadrant, there's spiritual health. On the southern quadrant, physical health. On the western quadrant, emotional health or environmental health. So in an indigenous mind, an indigenous experience, in the way that an indigenous person thinks about their lives, if one of these quadrants is off kilter, so say for example, my physical health, I hurt my leg, or say for example, my spiritual health, I'm feeling really not aligned with my ancestral experiences, and or my mental health, I'm really feeling like my mental capacity is being compromised. In an indigenous person's cultural experience, if there's one quadrant that's off kilter, it's affecting the whole body, mind, and spirit. If the spiritual quadrant is off kilter, it could be affecting my physical health because I'm not feeling physically in a good place, and it's affecting how I'm physically reacting to my experience for that day. So I think that's really important to understand as we start to work with communities that, particularly individuals who have been raised with traditional values will be thinking along these lines. And in order to get back into harmony, respecting all of these different elements is really important. Go ahead on to the next slide. Joseph Ray is a good friend of all of ours, and just phenomenal human. And he and I went up to Red Rocks and filmed this video. And he has another really great perspective that I'd like to share with you all. So if Austin will play Joseph's video, if we could hear from him.
Watsi Hopa. This is Joseph Ray. I'm up in Morrison, Colorado, Red Rocks State, Red Rock Park. I wanted to talk today about what NCAPs mean to me, National Center for Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. That's a huge word, a huge big term for a lowly native like me to really embrace. It's like what does that mean? But how I interpret it in my world is that when I was a child growing up in the reservation community that I grew up in, I could go to almost every home and be welcomed with food, discipline, or a combination of both. And that's how it was in our community of about 100 households. Each of us had a interest in the life that we were leading, and if we were okay and if we were happy as children. We as people need to come back together and remember these principles of what person-centered practices are. It's me and you as human beings relating, remembering the golden rule to treat each other as with respect. Back at home in the Pueblo of Laguna, where I'm from, 50 miles west of Albuquerque, we try and practice these words to love one another, to respect one another, to take care of one another, and it's difficult at times. But again, we believe that as American Indian Pueblo people, those are our core beliefs, and that's what has sustained us as people over the millennium, is that we cared about each other. We helped each other. We helped each other in our fields, in our farms, and in our building homes, caring for our elders. Caring for our elders is something dear to me because, again, I've been doing it all my life. For my grandmother, when I was a teenage boy, I had to be the caregiver for my grandmother, and she would feel so bad about it. She would be embarrassed that I would have to assist her in the bathroom, and she would be so embarrassed and cry. And I didn't accept that. I also was upset. I wanted to be out with my friends, with buddies, having a good time. But I cherish those moments now. Providing care to my grandmother. Many years later, my grandfather, we were able to care for him at his own home, and he passed away at home. But many others don't have that opportunity, and many of our elders end up in nursing homes away from their tribal community. There are only 20 tribally run nursing homes in the United States based on tribal land, and so in turn, our tribal elders have to leave the reservation to foreign places that they perhaps have never been to. Perhaps English is not their first language. And so again, these reminders of person-centered practices really I take to heart, because again, it means the care that my elders receive at home and away from home. So thank you very much. I'll conclude with that. Watsi Hopa. I wanted to talk today about
You can go ahead.
how person-centered practices and systems.
Thank you so much. Joseph actually recorded 2 different videos for me, and they merged them into one, which I forgot about. So my apologies for that. If you have an opportunity to go watch the 15 videos, there's also a training toolkit that I put together for NCAP so that you can utilize these different videos in your training and in your outreach and community support. But I think Joseph really wraps up the concepts that I hope to present to you at the beginning of this webinar. And I'd like to pass the baton over to Maria Martinez now to talk about her experiences specifically in Colorado as a person who has a brain injury and who's running some support groups and doing some great work in Colorado. So Maria.
Thank you, Regina. I want to first share that I was raised by two parents that had disabilities. My mother was blind. She was hearing impaired, and she had a stroke in the 70s. And my father had muscular dystrophy, and it was difficult to watch him because it eventually took his independence away. I cared for my mother as a person until she was 101 and recently has passed. But through that process, I have learned that as they aged, the translation, the ability for transportation and receiving a continuum of care was difficult for both them and for those of us who cared for them. And so I want to talk about some of the resources available in Colorado and how people can utilize those services to the best of their ability. MindSource Brain Injury Network it's under the Colorado Human Resource Services, and it allows us to obtain community grants. With those community grants, we are able to serve our population here in Pueblo, and we have united with the Center Towards Self-Reliance, which is a facility that works with all disabilities. And that has been a contributing asset to us to be able to reach out to the rural areas. The Brain Injury of Colorado is the main resource to obtain all resources that are given to people that are in need of some type of direction to receive care. There's the Brain Injury Waiver of Colorado, and I know that there are states that don't have brain injury waivers. Colorado does. And then we do have a Brain Step program which works with individuals, youth, through their educational system. The Craig Hospital works with spinal cord and traumatic brain injury. Brain Injury Hope Foundation is a place where they also provide education and events. And you can see the rest of them as you go down. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the time when COVID hit us. We had just received our first community grant from MindSource. And what it had done is it halted all external, everything that we wanted to do, everything how we wanted to reach out to the rural communities, how we wanted to bring everybody into a place where they can actually receive care, have education, vocational needs, etc. All that was stopped. And so we reinvented ourselves by being able to go online, and we started to work and develop a platform that we could present to people with brain injuries of all types. And that turned out to be pretty successful in the sense that we were able to bring in musicians, comedians, cooking classes, art classes. We played online games, and we brought in contests where people could carve out pumpkins. And if that's for people to think, well, you know, that's all good. But the main thing was that we needed a community. We needed a community because the isolation, the depression, the suicide rate was pretty high during that time. We had people that were losing their jobs. They were losing their homes. It was a need to connect. The hospital that we were being seen at stopped us from coming in because of the COVID. And so that turned out to be devastating for a lot of people that had a connection. So we, at this time, and we continue to do the services online, but we also do them in person. We have reached out to, in Pueblo itself, Pueblo County, we have a population of about 169,000 with approximately 9 towns in that, around 56 miles that covers that whole area. And it takes between 4.5 hours or more just to get to a location if you're having to need for need of care. For example, if you have to travel to Denver or you have to travel to a further location, even another state, it requires transportation, taking time off work. And a lot of times people are financially suffering from not making the monies that they need in order to take care of their families or to take care of their own particular needs. So those are the challenges that we have been facing. Even though COVID is over, it's still an issue of obtaining a continuum of care. And I think grief and loss during that time, people were losing families. And I think the only way that we could work with that was to bring in members from hospitals who were willing, to do webinars so that they could focus on grief and loss, anxiety, depression, etc. And that was really done well. The other contributing factor was, was that we used peer specialists from mental health. For mental health and substance use programs to have face-to-face contact with people. And that was very beneficial. Next slide, please. I'll turn this back over to Regina.
Thank you, Maria. I think one of the things that you highlight is the importance of collaboration and the way that you're able to collaborate with different agencies throughout Pueblo to come together and to recognize that we have people, individuals that are coming to your support groups who want support and community related to really, having empathy and understanding and relatability to the brain injury, right? And the experiences related to their brain injury. But there's all these other social determinants of health that are really barriers in the way of, so yes, we want community, but we also have some housing issues going on, mental issues going on. We have substance abuse issues going on. People are not able to access quality food. So the reason that I think it's so important to really understand the success of Maria's programs in Pueblo is her collaboration of different organizations coming together. She holds support groups in community resource centers. She makes sure that she knows substance and mental health professionals who, when someone is identified as needing services, she's able to reach out to those. Maria knows her community very, very well. If you talked with Maria about her community, she could tell you the demographics of her community. She could tell you the priorities that they're struggling with. And I would say 90% of the time, Maria can tell you where to seek services. She also knows where there's a need for services, where the services do not exist. So really, Maria is a champion in her community. And we listed some of the resources that Maria has at her fingertips, but I really think, understanding that Maria's success is attributed to her dedication, first and foremost, but then also to her lived experience of understanding what it feels like to be a person with a brain injury of a different culture in a rural area, providing services for an elderly mother who has disabilities herself. Maria encompasses a lot of different intersections of different identities. And so Maria's commitment to this comes from her lived experience of working through these processes. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that she's a phenomenal resource, not only to the brain injury community and to the rural communities and the indigenous communities, but to the disability community as a whole, she has a great handle on how to navigate those systems. And then also how to receive a grant, track it, and execute it. She has these skill sets, which are phenomenal skill sets to have as a community leader. We took the time to put together resources specific to Arizona. And so we provided a resource list, and Sonora is going to go ahead and plug that into the chat so that you have that resource list. But I mean, we're neighbors, and we are dealing with a lot of the same struggles. And I think it's really important that when we talk about peer support, we talk about state to state peer support and how we can support one another, and why create a program or a community outreach initiatives from scratch when you have some evidence-based vetted resources sitting right next door. Tap in, reach out to Maria and I through Re-Inspired Minds, and we'll do our best. If we can answer the question for you, as I work on a national level in my full-time job, I may know of another state that's working on something similar to your questions. So I wanted to make that plug. And I also wanted to give Cindy, who's here as a guest with us, an opportunity to introduce herself and talk about her work so that we have even one bigger, stronger initiative and set of work that we can learn from today. Cindy, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here, right here. Thank you so much, Regina. Thank you so much, Maria. Maria, that is so beautiful. This is such an excellent webinar to just open my mind to the excellent work that you have done to support rural community, to support people, indigenous community. And it's totally privileged to even speak with you all, that you have done so much. So I am Cindy Kai. I am a researcher from the American Institute for Research. In the past, I'm from China, so I am Chinese. My brother sustained a severe TBI. So my brother is 13 years older than me, and he was about 12 years old, 20 years old, so I was about 7. At the time, I was a child, and then I was taking care of him. I remember at that point, he was in coma several days. So it is just, I understand the challenge the family could have, the unknowns that people just experienced. And so and then later on became a researcher, and I have the privilege now to direct the National Center called Model Systems Knowledge Translation Center, which is on the list. On the bottom, but it is you're living with traumatic brain injury, MSKTC, Models of Knowledge Translation Center. That's the center I direct to help create resources to support free research-based resources to support people living with TBI and their families. And recently, I have the privilege to receive another federal grant to develop a resource bundle. We call it TBI Resource Bundle for American Indians. So I've just put that in the chat box if you want to check it out. And you can ask if you have questions, you can email me. I left my email address there as well. So this resource, this TBI bundle resource is a wonderful resource, because the time I did research, I realized that just as Josh shared early on, the American Indians experience just, higher level of TBI mortality rate and the lack of resources. I looked everywhere, I could not find culturally responsive, research-based, and up-to-date resources on TBI for American Indians. So I worked to write this grant and then fund it. So we have a website, and I put in the chat box. So what we have been doing is to collaborate with American Indians to develop a resource toolkit with and for American Indians. And all the resources are free, and they are based on research and reviewed by medical experts. And so ensure that they, the rigor of those resources, and they're responsive to the needs of American Indians with TBI, because we interview them, asking them what some of the challenges they have, what kind of resources they need. And the TBI resource bundle covers a wide range of topics, including headaches. We have published 3 resources now. One is concussion recovery. Another one is understanding TBI. And another one is alcohol use on TBI, how, strategies, how you stop drinking so that, you could really help improve, heal. And then also there are other topics under development, like headaches after TBI, memory loss. And then another thing is just the mental health issues like irritability, anger, and aggression management. That is very important as well. And depression management, vision problems, how you manage that, seizure, and then stay healthy and inpatient rehabilitation. There are more to be developed. And so those resources not only covered a wide range of topics, they're also strength-based. The strength-based is important because people don't come over here to just want to learn something without doing something about it. All these resources are designed to help empower American Indians with TBI and the community so that they can take actions to take controls of their condition and learn strategies to manage their condition. That's precisely that one of the goals of our resources is to make sure they are strength-based and with the goal of empowering American Indians with TBI and their families. And also they embed culture values and also test with American Indians with TBI their families and to ensure they're culturally responsive. We embed American Indian culture values like a sovereignty, autonomy, self-determination, and identity. And we're also using American Indian ways of knowing, like storytelling format to develop resources. And we engage American Indian artists in designing those resources. And American Indians with TBI and their families also review those resources before we can even publish. You can see this is rigorous, culturally responsive and evidence-based process when we develop those resources. We have developed, infographics. They're on the website in the chat box. You click on that, you can find it out. Those 3 infographics. Actually, matter of fact, we won a honorable mention for one of our infocomics for the 2023 Herms Creative Awards, which is the world's largest and oldest competitive communication awards. So we're very proud of it. And so those are truly high quality resources. Thank you, Regina. I like that. Yes. Thank you. We worked hard, really. Thank you. Yes, of course. And we're also we're developing comics. We're using comics to communicate health information because that's storytelling. And we feature American Indians, in our characters in there. And I just want to make sure that all these resources resonate with the community. And now our goal is to use this this free set of resources to really help American Indians with TBI and families to improve health and function, community living, employment outcomes. Those are all our goals. So we have taken a step further. We have worked with our funding agency to allow that communities, American Indian tribal communities, organizations, to customize our resources and to just further help disseminate and raise awareness. You can put your organization's logo and contact information, any endorsement language you want to put on the resource. We have reserved a section next to our TBI bundle logo for that white space, for that purpose. And you can contact contact me using my email address. I put in there ccai@air.org. And so, and it's also the customization information also on the website as well. And so wouldn't it be wonderful to have a set of resources that you can customize, put your logo and contact information so people know this is distributed by your organizer, endorsed by, and then build trust as well. And also personalize it as well. So now I have a plea to ask for your help. We have been engaging American Indian communities to help us review those resources. We'll provide incentives. And then the time we put it is on social media. We draw so many fake participants wanted to participate for money. And they're not, they may not have TBI, they're not even from tribal community. So I do wanted you to contact me at CCI@AR.org to let me know if you're American Indian with TBI or caregivers or, from that community. I would love to get your input. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have this resource represent your perspective, your community, and so that there will be more, there'll be more useful. So I really have this plea. So please contact me if you're interested in helping us to make those resources more useful. So thank you very, very much for having me. I feel so honored. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Wow, what a phenomenal set of resources. I'm really excited to delve in myself and figure out, how I can disseminate these nationally. So thank you for that, and congratulations. And I hope that you are taking some time to celebrate the successes related, because I know this is hard work, and we all appreciate the work that you're doing. I most appreciate the involvement of Native communities, Native individuals with lived experience. I think, you hit the mark right there, because we have to hear from communities themselves. So thank you for joining us today. I almost feel like we need a whole hour to really kind of delve into conversation with you specifically. But we have to get closer to wrapping up, and we have to make sure that we offer opportunity for questions and answers. And I know this always gets kind of the shortest end of the stick in terms of time, because we're trying so hard to give you all some quality information. So please know, if you'll switch to the next slide quickly, Austin, want to make sure that you know that, like Cindy, Maria and I are both available. You can shoot us your questions. But before we go, I wanted to read this quote out loud to you all, and then I will stop talking. My disabilities are perceived by American, excuse me, I'm going to read on my screen because it's bigger. My disabilities are perceived by my American Indian and Alaska Native peers as a part of me. I do not feel as stigmatized as I do in mainstream society. At the same time, powwows and community tribal events are not sign language interpreted. How can I learn my traditions from people without communication support? So that's a person with a disability feeling as though their culture doesn't create the stigma. However, the barriers to being able to participate in culture in and of itself creates a difficulty in her own culture. Damara Paris, that's her quote. So I just wanted to make sure that we left with that thought, and we'll open it up for questions. And like I said, please feel free to email us. And I'll turn it back over to Sonora so they can close, and just want to thank them for inviting myself and inviting Maria and Cindy, Austin and Josh. Thank you all so much, JC.